Hello and welcome everyone to this next edition of the Planning for Retirement podcast, where we help educate you on how retirement works. My name is Kevin Lau. I'm your host. I'm the owner of Imagine Financial Security, which is an independent investment advisory and financial planning firm registered in Florida. However, this information is for educational purposes only and should not be used as investment, legal, or tax advice. So I titled this one, this is episode 47, Should You Relocate in Retirement? And for those of you watching on Spotify or on YouTube, which you can do that, by the way, as of I think maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, my editor, Zach at the Podcast Man, he is beginning to publish our stuff on video. Right now, I don't really have any special effects on video. It's just me talking. But typically, you will see me talking in my home office in Florida. You will see this backdrop right now is completely blank, but not gonna lie, I kind of like it. It's pretty clean. And by the way, I did not even plan what I was wearing. I literally threw this shirt on, had this hat up that I've been wearing literally for the last week. But this is my new office in downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee. That is right. My family and I just moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where my wife is from. And it's just been quite an emotional, exciting, just so many emotions, just an exciting week, but an emotional week over the last really several weeks. You know, we've been in Florida for almost a decade now, and it's where, you know, really my wife and I built our family and our life and my business. And, you know, the house we've lived in for the last 3.5 years, I mean, just so many great memories in that home. And we'll always cherish those memories and love those memories. But anyways, I just figured, hey, listen, I just moved. It's been crazy. I don't have a topic that I want to talk, that I prepared to talk about for this week. So what am I going to do? But I figured, hey, what a timely thing to talk about relocating in retirement. Okay. And so for those of you that are approaching retirement, let's say over the next 5 or 10 years, or even 6 months from now, and you're thinking, hey, you know, does it make sense for me to relocate in retirement, right? Or perhaps you've already relocated. Maybe you've already retired and relocated in retirement already, and just, you know, want to hear some of my thoughts about this particular topic, and just figured, you know, given I just went through a move myself personally, albeit not retired now, have had the luxury of speaking with many folks who have relocated in retirement and even relocated leading up to retirement. And most of them relocated to the Sunshine State of Florida, which I resided over the last 10 years. And real quick, just on that one, listen, I feel like it's not a goodbye to Florida for us and for my family and for my business. We plan, or at least I plan, and sometimes with my entire family, but I plan to make visits on a quarterly basis to visit family and friends and clients in Florida. My plan is to make these visits and just continue to, cultivate those relationships that we've built over the last 10 years. And so I feel like it's not a goodbye, but in a sense, it was a goodbye for many reasons. You know, the home office that I've worked 90% of my days. I mean, I did have an office and still do maintain that office in Jacksonville, Florida. But I predominantly used my office that was in my house. And so it's a little bit sentimental, a little bit surreal. All of my office furniture right now is in the basement of our house, which the house we're in right now is a rental. So, you know, I told my wife, I said, listen, if we're going to make this move, I've never lived in Tennessee. I've never lived in Chattanooga. She hasn't lived in Chattanooga in probably 20 years. And so I just told her, I said, listen, you don't know exactly where you want to be yet. Let's just get a rental before we decide on where we're going to be, and then ultimately find the right house, the right property, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways, so I've had these conversations with retirees over the last 10 years working in the state of Florida. So I thought I'd share some of the top reasons that I've seen or that I've heard from my clients, or even prospective clients, or even just folks I've had conversations with over the years that I've run into that have retired and moved to the state of Florida and relocated in retirement. And even some of them, by the way, relocated and left Florida. Some of them I worked with that were preparing for retirement decided to relocate and move to a different state for a variety of reasons. So I just thought I'd share some of these with you for whatever it's worth, especially for those of you that are contemplating making this big move. So I think the first thing about this topic real fast to address before we jump into these 6 reasons that I came up with is that it's a pretty cool opportunity for many of you. And for many of you that are, let's say, baby boomers or even Generation X, maybe you're on the older side of Gen Xers, you may not have been in a position, or at least for very long, maybe since the post pandemic, to be in a position to live wherever you want to. I feel like Gen Z, the folks that have come into the workforce over the last handful of years coming in after COVID, many of them didn't even work in an office ever. And so they don't even know what that's like. And so many of you have been working in an office or being in a location that was tied to your job for decades. And it's kind of a cool opportunity for many of you to sort of think through like, hey, is this the city we want to stay in retirement for the next 10, 15, 20 years, or even the next 5 years, even looking short term. So, it's essentially as you prepare for retirement. So it's a pretty cool opportunity. And that's why I feel like so many people that I've talked to that have relocated have done it for the right reasons. And so what I do is I put together a list, like I said, the top 6 that I could come up with. I hope you find these helpful. Then what I'll do is I'll just talk through some of the challenges to look out for and some of the complexities that I've seen and sort of, from my observations in working with clients in retirement over the years, some of the things that they have regretted, potentially about where they are living. So anyways, I digress. Why don't we jump into number 1 is the weather is the obvious one, at least for the last 10 years for me, working predominantly with folks that are in Florida or planning to move to Florida in a very short period of time. And so many of these folks are coming from the Northeast, right? So maybe it's New York or New Jersey, and they've been spending the last 10, 15, 20 years shoveling snow, and they're just sick of it. I feel like I remember, there was, forgive me, because I don't live in the Northeast and have never lived in the Northeast for that matter. I think it was 2021. There was an exorbitant amount of snow in the Northeast, I think particularly Massachusetts. And I just remember speaking to a couple of neighbors that moved down from there, and they said, after that winter, they are moving to Florida. And so that's a big driver, especially for folks that are retiring and they can live wherever they want to live. Why not live in the Sunshine State? Especially if you've had, harsh winters for most of your life. And, you've had that doom and gloom of, overcast and cold winters that seem to last about 6 months. So that makes a ton of sense, For others, it honestly could be other reasons, from a weather perspective. Like I mentioned, I've had some people leave Florida because they complain about the humidity or saying, there's too many alligators, and they relocate to the state of North Carolina. They call these folks halfbacks, right? And this is the trend now, is that folks that move to Florida and then they move halfway back somewhere, mostly in North Carolina, some even in Tennessee, which is now my new home state here, right? And so these halfbacks, they said, hey, I don't really love Florida. Didn't really fall in love with Florida. It wasn't for me. I'm not really about that lifestyle. I want to maybe go towards the mountains. And honestly, my wife is kind of like that. There are beach people and there are mountain people. And my wife is definitely more of a mountain person. So obviously, being from Chattanooga, this is where she feels is home to her. So, but anyways, the weather, I would say, is number 1. By far and away. But number 2, a very close second for me and the clients that I serve is lower cost of living. And you know what? I would say this isn't really necessarily in order. I shouldn't even say it's a close second. This is more of the second thing that came to my mind, because I will say the number 3 is I put in here is taxes. That one is a big one. Okay. Especially for folks that moved to Florida or even moved to Tennessee. That was one nice thing. My wife did pick a nice state to be from. Is at least it's going from Florida, no state income taxes, to Tennessee, which is also no state income taxes. So not 100% certain about property taxes. I don't own property in Tennessee. I would imagine it's probably comparable to Florida, maybe even a little bit lower. So we'll see. But I would say low cost of living is a big driver. Many folks, they're living in New York or in New Jersey in essentially like a modest home that they could sell, and they did sell for, let's say, $1 million or even 1.5 million, or even heck, even $750,000. You sell that property that you paid, maybe 150 or 200,000 for 30 years ago. Now you're walking away with cash, 100% equity, obviously minus realtor costs, closing costs, etc. But, you're walking with a large sum of cash that you can now turn around and buy a much nicer home in the Southeast, predominantly, like, let's say Florida. We're talking about the folks that retired to Florida. New builds for, let's say, 750,000 to 850, or even $1 million. Let's say you sold a property for 1.5, you receive 100%. You're going to pay a little bit in taxes, most likely, on that transaction. There is an exclusion on taxes, depending on your filing status, as well as the usage of that particular property, which we're actually going to talk about in a podcast episode next time. So more to come on that one, but you're going to be walking away with, let's say, $1 million or $1.2 million in cash that you can buy something pretty nice in the state of Florida and not have a mortgage, and sometimes even have leftover surplus at the end of that transaction. So now you're walking free and clear from a property that wasn't as nice. It maybe needed some repairs. Maybe it's 40 or 50 years old at this point. And now you're turning around buying a brand new build, much better bang for your buck. And you have money to deploy in your investment portfolio in like a non-qualified brokerage account. Oftentimes that's driving success versus failure in a potential retiree's plan is if they stay in the high cost of living area, they're potentially falling short or potentially needing to make an adjustment to spending, or maybe fewer vacations on an annual basis, or less giving to their children or grandchildren, whatever it might be. Moving to that lower cost of living area could essentially increase their cash flow and essentially give them a much better quality of life as well. Because, really these are all coordinated with one another. You don't just move just because of one of these. Most likely it's a combination of these reasons that I'm going to lay out. So if it's the weather and lower cost of living, that might be a driving force for you to say, hey, let's really consider this thing, right? Number 3, I already mentioned this, already teased this one, is lower taxes, right? I would say this is really the starting point, I think, for a lot of folks that are preparing for retirement, or even, let's say they're in their peak earning years and they're living, I'm going to continue to pick on the state of New York, or maybe they're living in California, which also has high state income taxes. And they're thinking, hey, when I retire, I'm going to move to Florida, or I'm going to move to Texas, or I'm going to move to Tennessee, all of which don't have state income taxes. Or maybe you move to a state that has more favorable tax treatment on retirement benefits. There are several states that have tax-free income. Some of the income that you receive from, let's say, pensions or Social Security, or even distributions from retirement accounts, could be exempt from state income taxes. So maybe that individual, you are planning to move to a low or no state income tax state. You might decide to defer a lot of the taxes you're paying right now, defer that income until you do retire, move to that state, and now you can claim your primary residence in a no or low state income tax state and pay lower taxes on those distributions from those retirement accounts. Okay. So this is a big reason why I see people relocate, is maybe they're living in one of those high state income tax states because they're forced to, because of their job or family or whatever it might be. Or maybe they just feel stuck. Maybe the cost of living is so high they can't really move anyways because they're stuck, because of where prices have come over the last decade. So yeah, lower taxes could also dovetail into lower expenses. I've talked about this earlier in previous episodes, as many of our clients, their highest expense in retirement is their tax bill. And so if they can reduce their tax bill and increase the amount of cash flow they have, that's more money that they can spend during retirement. It's a win-win situation. So it's a big driving factor. If you go from, hey, potentially having to pay in the state of New York anywhere from 4% up to 10.9%, based on your income, versus 0%, that's a significant trade-off. If you're making $100, $200, $300,000 in income in retirement, we're talking several 5 figures, easily 6 figures on an annual basis of tax savings. So that is not insignificant. And then if you're moving from, let's say, New Jersey, it could be a high income taxes for state income and also high property taxes. So it could be the double whammy from a tax perspective. And so that's a big driving force why people decide to sort of sell out at these much higher multiples for home prices and move to a lower cost of living area, because then also they're going to be potentially moving to a lower tax area as well. Number 4 I put in here is healthcare. I think this is really a big one that I see is folks that are moving to a specific town. They've done some research on a particular doctor or practice or hospital that they have an affinity to, and they want to have close proximity to those facilities. And so I see that is a big reason, especially being in the Jacksonville area over the last decade. Many folks moved to Florida because of the Mayo Clinic. And, there are people that travel from all over the world that go to the Mayo Clinic. That was right in our backyard. Now, the challenge is if you're moving there today, good luck getting in as a patient. I mean, there are wait lists for all of the Mayo practices. It doesn't matter who you are. I used to be a Mayo primary care patient, and when I used to have the corporate benefits when I worked for TIAA, and that was a really nice policy. And when I had to get an individual self-employed plan, that was challenging, much more expensive and not as comprehensive of coverage. And Mayo Clinic was no longer available to me. So, but healthcare is a big driver for retirees. And so that's a consideration wherever you're moving to or wherever you're planning to retire. Even if you're going to just stay in that particular area, make sure you have a great healthcare team. Make sure you have a great primary care doctor and specialists. If you need specialists, just make sure that team is in place. And if you are relocating, certainly make sure you do your homework, because that is a challenging thing for many folks that I talk to in retirement is healthcare. And, even for Medicare, even these doctors that take Medicare, oftentimes they have the wait lists and the coverage. Sometimes, I've had some complaints. I have some clients. They don't go anywhere where the doctors accept insurance. They go private pay only, particularly because the healthcare is higher quality in their mind. And some of these individuals are doctors themselves. So that says something to me. Obviously, I'm not on Medicare, but many of you are on Medicare already or going to be enrolling in Medicare very soon. Don't just put yourself in a box where you're only using doctors that accept the Medicare. Sometimes if you may need to see a specialist, maybe you want to get a second opinion. Maybe you want to go to a doctor that is private pay only because they're not incentivized by anyone else. They're specifically working for you for the most part. So anyways, that is my novel understanding of private pay versus insurance. All right. Number 5 is moving near or even away from family. And, maybe you're wanting to be closer to your grandkids, or maybe you're wanting to be closer to your brothers or sisters, or maybe you want to be closer to your aging parents. Whatever that might be, this is often a reason I see folks relocate. So this might not even be a decision that is up to you in particular, or maybe it's not 100% up to you, but a primary factor is relocating to be closer to family. This is a difficult one for me. I'm living this right now. I mean, on one hand, my wife's family, Jessica's family, is in Chattanooga, and she has her mom, her stepdad, one of her brothers is in Chattanooga with his family. Her other brother's in Nashville. Her father and stepmom are in Kingsport, Tennessee. So she's got a ton of family in Tennessee. On the other hand, my parents live in the Jacksonville area. And so there were some complexities there. And that's why I've told people, if you know me and we've had conversations about this was one of the most difficult decisions I've had to make, period. Because on one hand, you've got family in the city that you live in. On the other hand, you have family in the other city, on the other spouse's family. And so where the other spouse is from. And so that's a difficult one right here. And so, I really encourage everyone that is considering relocating because of family situations or family dynamics, make sure the move you're making is also in the best interest of you and your spouse or partner, or if you're single, it's you, period. And so make sure you've got reasons to move there outside of family. Okay. So whether it's a support group, maybe you have some close friends that live there as well, or maybe you have Maybe there's a lifestyle you want to live. Maybe there's a 55 plus community that you've always wanted to live at. And here's your opportunity. Now that you're retired, you have the free time and the flexibility and the independence to do it, and you want to do it. And so just make sure your family is obviously important, but I will say sometimes it brings some complexities. And so that was why this decision was so difficult for my family, is because it was also a decision to leave my family, my parents. And if you know me, you know I have a phenomenal relationship with my parents, and I am forever grateful for them, and I love them dearly. They've supported me for my entire life. I mean, they have bent over backwards to support me, whether it be through my successes or even at my lowest moments, bailing me out of the jail cell in Blacksburg, Virginia when I was 17 years old for underage drinking. So they've been there for me through the ups and downs. And so I love them dearly. And so it was a difficult decision. But again, for me as a father and as a husband, one of the things that my parents did teach me is that you've got to put your spouse first. You've got to put your kids first. And, we believe that this was the best decision for us and our family unit. And that was why we made it. And, but it's a tough one. But I'd say family is a dynamic, but also should be taken with, hey, maybe you have a combination of family and something else as being a reason of moving to a specific area, not family in and of itself. That's all I'm saying. Number 6, I would say this kind of dovetails into number 3. What I mentioned is taxes, but I'll say is number 6 is politics. And you're not going to really see this on a lot of those top lists. Like, I did some research on this before doing this episode, and a lot of these top lists, this was not in there. And I would say it's a driving factor for many folks that I have talked to over the years that have moved to Florida from, let's say, New York, New Jersey, California, those states in particular. Many of them moved because of the politics, and they want to change, and they weren't happy with where things were, what was going on in their particular states. And then many of them, it really, 2020 during the pandemic, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And so that was the year, I believe, where this really began to escalate, especially for the area that we lived in Northeast Florida. Such an increase in migration from those particular states to the state of Florida and to other states as well. Don't forget about Texas and Arizona and Nevada. I mean, those are states that had many residents picked up and left those blue states to go to those red states. And so it'll be really interesting also, just as an aside, and I'm going to leave this at that, but it's going to be really interesting to see. And now that a lot of these companies are bringing their workers back to the office, back to a physical office, whether it's 100% of the time or maybe it's a hybrid model, it's going to be very interesting to see if these individuals have to move back to those states they wanted to leave, right? Because maybe they wanted to coast to retirement. Maybe they're 5 years away and they're like, hey, I'm going to move to Florida because I can work remotely and then coast until retirement, and I'll just stay in Florida. Now, hey, do you have to move back to New York or back to California or back to a state you didn't want to be in the first place? What is going to happen? Are you going to just retire and just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to work another couple of years. I'm going to just go ahead and retire. I've seen that trend. I've definitely seen that trend over the last couple of years because these companies are starting to bring people back to the offices, and many of those workers don't want to go back to the office. But anyways, I'll just leave it at that. Is politics is a big reason why I see people relocate. And like I said, all of these, this is just a little short list of some of the reasons I run into. And again, this is me practicing with many folks that are retiring to the state of Florida. Depending on where you live or where you plan to move to in retirement, the reasons might be different, but you get what I'm saying here. And so I just wanted to highlight some of these decisions because they are difficult decisions, But what I would say is this decision, if you're contemplating doing this in retirement or very soon, and you're probably having anxiety about this, right? You're probably worried about moving. And that's really the conversation I've had with many folks that have recently done this, is they have still to this day or had significant anxiety leading up to that particular move, because it is a big deal. So you're not alone in this one, but also just know that it doesn't have to be permanent forever. I just ran into someone actually in my neighborhood in Florida. She retired to St. Augustine from Rhode Island, and she saw all the boxes and saw the moving trucks. She said, "Oh my goodness, you're moving." And I'd seen her over the years. She had always been really friendly to me. And, she said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to be right there behind you. I'm moving back to Rhode Island." I think it was Rhode Island. And so there you go. I mean, she's been here, I think, or been here. I say she's been in St. Augustine for 2 years. And she's already decided to move back. So don't feel all this pressure that it has to be your forever home right away. I even mentioned, my family, we're renting here in Chattanooga for at least a year, because like I said, I just want to get a feel for the area before we're deciding what area of Chattanooga we're living in long term, right? I'm assuming Chattanooga is going to work out for all the reasons that I mentioned before, but you never know. So we're going to be renting for a year. Maybe you do that. Maybe you find a place that you can Airbnb for 3 to 6 months, a longer term Airbnb, if you will. And so maybe you do that for 3 to 6 months and get a feel for it before you decided to full on move. Or if you do move, just know that, listen, it doesn't have to be forever. If you move to, let's say, the Tampa area, let's say you want to retire to the Tampa area. There are so many areas in the Tampa Bay area. You've got downtown Tampa, you've got St. Pete's, you've got Clearwater, you've got Treasure Island, and I'm sure plenty of others in that area. I'd also just wanted to end with one last recommendation on this one. Is I talked a little bit earlier about community and the sense of community wherever you live, not only with family, but also friends and peers. Because listen, the reality is this: regardless of what family is around, everyone has busy lives. You're going to have your own busy life, and they're probably going to have their own busy lives as well. Maybe they have children. So maybe your grandkids are getting shuttled around to all these different activities. Just know that life is hectic. And so just having that community is really important, that I've seen for clients that I've worked with that have retired, and that, let's say, move to these 55 plus communities, and they're really active. They're very social. They've been pretty happy. And some of them have had family locally, but some of them they just moved there with no family, and they're very happy overall. And many of them have decided to stay in those particular communities. I've had some that actually left one of these communities. It's called Del Webb in Ponte Vedra. There are Del Webbs all over the place, but this particular one in Del Webb, Ponte Vedra, they moved out to Arizona to be closer to one of their family members, and they decided to move back. And they moved back to the Del Webb community. So, I think that social community for some of you is going to be really important. Now, some of you are probably more antisocial. You don't want to have all these activities all the time. And so, just thinking about different ways you can get involved and meet other like-minded people like yourself, because building that sense of community, everything that I've read, all the studies that I've read and even seen with my clients that are super happy and energetic and healthy in retirement, they're the ones that have a really tight-knit, active community of other peers that are like-minded to them. That's a big deal. And so if you can control that, and if you can control your health, your physical health, your mental health, and obviously taking care of your financial health, all of those things, you're going to be in a great position. And so you can look at this again as an opportunity for potential change. And so with that, that is all for today. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for being there during this episode as I record this with very little sleep over this past week because of this move. And so I appreciate you because my energy level, I'm feeling energized because I'm in this new space. But I'm telling you right now, not a lot of sleep has been had over the last week or so. Let's put it that way. Anyways, I appreciate all of y'all. If you have found value in this particular episode or even episodes in the past, make sure to give the show a 5-star review. Make sure to give the show a follow. It just helps us reach more people, and we appreciate that. That's what we're all about. Again, this is not my full-time job. I am not a professional podcaster. I run a financial planning business. I help people plan for retirement. And what this show is there to give you the insights that I've had over the last 15 or 16 years, having the pleasure of doing what I do, so you can prepare mentally for retirement and execute that retirement. And so if this is you, make sure to give the show a follow, and make sure to give, share this with a friend of yours too. You've got other peers that are also planning for retirement that need to hear about the content that we've put out recently and over the last couple of years. Go back and listen to our previous episodes. Let's say from, honestly, even the very beginning. I mean, the first episode's pretty brutal, not going to lie. That was our introductory episode. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. But go back and listen to that. And so, again, thank you so much. That's all I ask for you or from you, I should say. And so until next time, like I said, next time we're going to hit on this topic of primary residence and capital gains exclusions. So that's going to be the topic next time. So make sure to tune in a couple of weeks, every other Thursday, and we will look forward to seeing you then and seeing you soon. Thanks. Until next time, this is Kevin Lau signing off.